So welcome, guys.
Welcome.
We just started, and we just came from our Ray2Go show where we talk about empathy in business and marketing in particular. We can continue to talk about that for a while. Maybe you have examples of companies that you feel are really good at understanding their clients. And I had brought up the example of those people of a certain generation that read Robert A. Heinlein, the word grok, which means actually going beyond just understanding, because we can go and dig, and we do this, right? As marketers, we dig through all kinds of data, we analyze it, and then we have this formula for who our customer persona is. But that's kind of like rational. What we're talking about is empathy, and empathy is an emotional thing. So how do you empathize? How do you find a way of connecting with your clients so that you really know how, not so much what they like or what their pain points are, but how they feel? And that takes it to a whole different level, and that's what we were discussing today. It's a big topic for sure.
It's a huge topic, and you know, I'm gonna start with my TSA story. So if you live outside of the United States, but you've ever been in the U.S. and gone through our security system, we don't just have metal detectors anymore, and people. We have an entire separate entity that comes into the airport that works for itself and is just kind of there in the middle of everything, called TSA, and I have no idea what TSA stands for. It has something to do with keeping us secure and all that good stuff. And it's really interesting because I think about, I was actually thinking about the people who are attracted to be part of the TSA, right? You have basically ultimate authority. Just some security guards are like this, some police officers are like this, and while I am stereotyping a little, I'm saying that certain types of roles attract certain types of personalities, and I don't think that's a stereotype. I think that's just a given that we recognize and understand. And I was going to my dad's house, Ray, a couple weeks ago, and we had Bailey, my dog, with us, and we stood in the security line for an hour, and we get up to the front, close to the front, and they have a canine unit in the front. And I got told by somebody, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait in the line on the other side of the airport because, and this is a TSA agent, because we have a canine working here and dogs aren't allowed over here. And I was like, okay. So, and he dug his heels in and he was insane and up, and he was kind of in my face. And here I am, I've got my 4-year-old, I've got my husband, I've got this dog, I'm straddled down with all of our stuff, and he's telling me to do this. So my cheery self, what did I say? I said, I am so happy to do whatever you need. Thank you for escorting us to the front of the other line so we can make our plane. Oh, and that did not go over very well.
No.
But what did I do? I made it was an assumptive clause of, I am glad to listen to you and I'm glad to support what you do, and in return you will support me too.
And that comes off as being sarcastic and
no, actually I was, and it might hear, but it wasn't supposed to. I was like, sure, I'm glad to help. So we can't stand in an hour-long line. I mean, that was the business. We can't stand in an hour-long line. Here's my idea. Take me over there. And so it got pretty escalated, and he was in my face and raising his voice and all of this stuff. And you know, TSA is known for this in airports of just basically being bullies to passengers and making flying not fun. What I noticed in that moment was, okay, I have a couple of choices to react. And my innate reaction was, holy crap, we're not going to get to see my dad. So my eyes are filling with tears, and I'm trying not to raise my voice, even though he's raising his voice. And Ryan was awesome. He just stood there and said, we're not going anywhere. and somebody else noticed that we're having this, what's going to turn into some sort of a verbal altercation here any moment. And another TSA person came over, found out what was going on, got 2 other TSA agents over, took the guy away, and helped us through the line. So you have this idea of what TSA is, and I experienced that just a few weeks ago, and it's been over 10 years since TSA has been in place here. But they're just now starting to come around to go, we need to take care of the people and understand the roles, the position that these people in the security line are, in addition to doing whatever we've got to do to keep them safe, or you know, whatever they are taught or trained or whatever. And I thought that was a great story, because I'm watching TSA in a changing moment from what they used to be, and in a moment clashed an old versus a new coming through. And I thought that was a really neat thing And so this is actually a TSA hooray story, not a
Wow, that's our topic, because there are segments of the workplace that don't want you to be empathetic, right? And we can think of a Marine shouldn't be empathetic. Anybody in the armed forces, I guess, they don't want to be empathetic. TSA is a good example of that. Policemen, if you're too empathetic, then if you feel sorry for the person you're arresting, it's going to be difficult to do your job. So there are cases like that, but I think what the interesting thing about the TSA is that, yes, they're there for security, but who is the threat? They treat everybody, American citizens who they're there to protect, as a possible threat. So when does that cross the line? And it's horrible traveling now. They've ruined everything. I mean, it's the same thing in any country, and even in Canada, we don't have TSA, but our security, with the whole liquid thing. I mean, one guy tries to put liquids in his shoe, and now everybody has to take their shoes off at airports. I mean, a little overreacting, I think,
Yeah.
So, and we're all treated as possible threats. And I don't know if that's good for a psyche of a country, let alone person.
That you make a good point. And I actually think that it's a little bit of a ripple in a pond too, because you're right. You have that bad experience. Now what's going to happen? If it had turned out badly, what is likely to have happened? I have no idea if this is what would have actually happened, because I'm a little too not offended by this kind of stuff to let it get to me personally. But I could have had a bad day, so I could have taken it out on somebody who I bought a coffee from, or actually I would have bought a tea from behind security. I would have taken it out on the flight attendants inside the airplane. I probably would have been mad at angry when I got to the airport, a baggage claim in a totally other city at that point in time. So I think we also, we don't know where people are coming from. And we don't know, and that's, I think, the biggest thing. Just because we think we know our customers doesn't mean we haven't walked in their shoes today and in this moment when they're reaching out to us. And that is for our employees too. We don't know what they're doing, what might be weighing on them when they come into work, if they have a weird reaction or show up differently than they have weeks and months past.
So I'm going to ask anybody we don't have a lot of people here yet, but I'm going to ask those who are here, what kind of companies, because we had talked in the show about the empathy comes from the top down. It's a company culture thing. It's like social, when we talk about social media. But what companies would it be a disadvantage to be empathetic?
None.
Okay, so I'll leave that question open and see.
I want to see what other people say.
I'll tweet that. Okay.
But I do, and that's interesting, because it goes back to how good are our own skills around observation, around listening, and being able to match up observation with listening to hear what somebody's actually saying versus the action they may be taking, or what some underlying thing may be, and closing that gap.
There you go. We'll see. I just posted that question on Twitter. We'll see if anybody responds to it.
Yeah, I have an answer. It is a bail bondsman.
Oh, yeah, and collection officers. Do you know any personally?
No, but I did go to school with a person who's purportedly a hitman for the mafia.
Really? That's another job that probably wouldn't help if you're too empathetic.
And he was the nicest guy in the entire world. And what we figured out, and this is all unconfirmed, but he was just hanging out, going to a small college in the middle of Montana. We couldn't figure out why he was there. He was having a fine time, and he would leave for a week or two every once in a while, and then he'd come back. And anyway, that's my answer.
Well, okay, I think there's a time to compartmentalize. I think every single role of every single person in every single job that they have, I think there's a time we have to turn off our empathy for our own sake. 1, to get the job done. 2, maybe to meet a deadline. 3, because it's the only way we can separate what's going on in our life from the person who we're interacting with. Because if I'm emotional and I come across you being emotional, how can I set aside my judgment? How can I set aside what I think? How can I set aside my advice without and actually hear what somebody else is saying?
Well, you want your medical provider to be empathetic but not emotional. I mean, you don't want your surgeon to not be have empathy for you. I mean, there may be a little bit of pain that will be inflicted, and that goes just with a job. You don't want, your dentist. Okay, you want an empathetic dentist, but if you don't want one that is so emotional that they lose it
well, I guess
when
I'm
they're working
saying
on you.
emotion is a trigger to preventing empathy. Does that make sense?
No.
Well, okay.
Follow.
When I'm talking about emotional, I'm talking about upset. Let's say, okay, I'm late to work and I'm just harried. I'm stressed out. Something happened in my personal family and it was just a tragedy to me, whether it was or not. I mean, it could be some people react poorly to missing the trash man, right? I'm going to have that kind of a reaction. All I have to bring to the table is drama. So at that point, I have to check the emotions because there's no way I could be empathetic, to Scott's point, if my emotions are standing in the way. My emotion will kill my opportunity to be empathetic.
Okay.
So is the character Spock in Star Trek, he's a beloved character. He's got empathy, doesn't he?
But that's his human side, which he tries to repress, right? So, I use that analogy in the show about mind melding and to explain what grokking was. But and in that way, he literally feels the other person, everything. But outside of that, he does everything he can not to be empathetic. He wants to play by the rules, and that's it.
And I think that goes to the other side of this. Sometimes rationality can allow a place or not allow, right, to get in the way of, just like an emotion or a poorly processed emotion, maybe, just like somebody who's that. And that's where we were talking about at the beginning, Ray, when we were talking about policemen or Marines or anybody in the military, that there's a time and a place, because I think those guys, I actually think at least a lot of our military, they are truly empathetic and they want to help and they want to reach out to the people and support, yet they've got to be super rational and in the moment and draw on those skills to get their jobs done and keep themselves and their peers, their comrades, or that you don't call them that. I don't know what you call them. I'm not in the military. And the people they're there to protect, actually, to stay safe. I mean, I watch, the firemen here, same thing. They collect money and then they go do their job, and they've got to have their rationality on, their ability to have. What? I'm losing the word. It's not rationale anymore.
Let's see if we can come up with it. I know what you mean. They've got to be.
So are you suggesting that we can turn that off and on? For a policeman who is like facing riots on the street can come home and say, "Hi, hon, hi, kid," and then he totally blocks everything out and then becomes a normal human being.
I think it seeps over, but I do think that skills can be developed to keep it healthy. So if I've had, and this is policeman or not, there are days I get done and I can't. I've handled so many problems. I've dealt with so many very highly charged situations that I'm nothing at the end of the day. So how do I have to really take it easy when I come home and set the stage. And if I had to, if I have family or friends coming to visit me the next day, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that I've got to do as soon as I get home, and I'm basically dead, emotionally empty, not able to handle anything. But now I have this other whole big list of things. It's up to me and my skill set to go, what can I realistically do? Is it realistic at all? How do I take care of myself here? Because if I don't, everybody else is going to get hurt in the process, including me. Emotionally.
Well, you're actually kind of talking about being professional. What does professionality have to do with it? So if you're a professional in your role, then you're able to take whatever is thrown at you and be able to respond appropriately. But when you go home, you don't necessarily take it home with you. I think of doctors in the ER, and I also think of high school teachers. So, you go and...
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
Well, that was supposed to be a joke, so thank you for laughing.
Well, that's good, but I was laughing at David.
Oh.
He has zero empathy and he hates us all.
He hates us all. But I think...
So you weren't laughing at my joke?
I was not laughing at your joke. I'm so sorry.
I have a question for you, because because you're talking about emotions, and I think that they're a bit different, but there is a danger of being hyper empathetic, which I through most of my life was, and it's debilitating, because I can walk down, and it happened. I walk down the street, for instance, and I see a cop, maybe a couple of cops arresting somebody, some homeless kid or whatever else, and I start to cry, because I'm totally inside that kid's body thinking, oh my God, the guy's got no home. Who knows what he's done? He's got these big authority figures ganging up on him, and I'm a big sob that way. I mean, I just, I immediately feel someone's pain, and that can be debilitating. You tend to be codependent. You tend to be an enabler, that kind of thing, So that's the extreme. But when we're talking about companies, I don't think we run into that kind of problem there at all. But I want to ask you a question. Do you think technology like cell phones and drones are making us a less empathetic culture, society? Because there's a distance between you and the result of whatever actions you do?
That's a really good question. I would answer that I don't think we have enough data yet to tell from the generations coming up. So we're talking about like my son's generation, or my nieces who are getting close to graduating from high school, their generation. But I do think I think that we are looking for connection in different ways, even if it is through technology. And for those of us who, and this is me included, I didn't have a computer until I was in the house. We had a computer when I was in the 3rd or the 4th grade. So, and let alone, having the internet, we didn't understand what that was. So we weren't connected by anything else besides a regular telephone, and the phone companies charged us for that. So we really weren't talking to people far away either. And I think that we have to adapt to technology and come up with a way to make connections. And if there are other things happening in our brain, which this is an area I know nothing about, other to say then there's other things going on besides just distancing us. There's stuff that happens in our brain that we would need some sort of a brain expert to come talk to us about how those things happen in the brain and how technology makes us feel like we're more connected, but it's fooling us. It's pulling the wool over our eyes.
I'm going to bring up, because I don't want to forget this question, so please don't let me forget it, because I think it's intriguing. Okay, well, David, why don't you just, if you could jump into the conversation, and there's a seat open, because he's got a couple of good points here.
Good questions.
I see I was listening to this program on CBC, and they're talking about this fact, just technology, and they're talking about kids. And the fact that, normally in the olden days, like, 5 years ago, a kid would be in the schoolyard and they would say something offensive like, oh, you're fat, to another kid. And the kid would react, obviously, and the kid would see that reaction and then say, he could make a judgment saying, oh, that was really nasty. I shouldn't have said that or whatever. And that's how you kind of grow and mature into kind of an emotional, quotient kind of person thing. So, but now with that distance of texting and even, that kind of thing, and drones, like we're talking about military, the fact that someone in Arkansas is controlling a drone that's landing bombs on a place, there's no connection to the damage that you're doing to the human lives that you're taking. Does this all add up? Does this all build a less empathetic society? What do you think, David?
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's not what I was walking into.
Welcome. It's so good to see you, David.
Well, I think it plays to the distance that we all have now between us and our audience. Like a while ago, I talked about how a lot of businesses, especially when they go online, they lose that connection to their audience because their audience isn't actually in front of them. It's not that, it's not somebody that's walking into their store where they can have a conversation and bond as human being to human beings. So there's this weird separation. But at the same time, in content marketing and how I talk to my clients about content marketing, I say, put yourself in their shoes and try to visualize them as a specific person you have in mind, a buyer persona. And I joke that when I write some of my content, I have this picture of one of my clients who is an older lady who owns a bed and breakfast in the middle of nowhere. And I actually write some of my content as if I'm writing to her specifically, and which brings me to the conversation of, do I have to be, one of those I'm gushing with feelings in order to have not necessarily sympathy, but to understand their emotional distress and everything else, that part of the empathy part without it being the.
It's a great.
That's it. You kind of tie the emotion and the empathy together. And I don't necessarily think that they perhaps have to be that closely. I mean, you don't have to gush, because I actually introduced today's show as another touchy-feely show, because we had just done an emotional connection show 2 weeks back. But in a sense, I think what you're saying, yes, you have to understand, and you don't have to get mushy about, feeling for your client or trying to understand what your client's going through so that you can make decisions based on that. And I use the example of, Heinlein's grokking. To grok. Do you know that? Are you familiar with that term, David?
Grokking?
Yeah, grok. It's the word he used in Stranger in a Strange Land, Robert Lee Heinlein, a book that everybody read in this.
I haven't read that in a decade or so. Okay.
And we used it, but we use it on the street, and actually programmers use it now. Once they really figure out a program totally, say, man, I grok it, So grokking basically it takes you that one step beyond just understanding something to actually embody it, to understand all aspects of it. So you're almost doing a mind meld, to take another sci-fi thing,
I totally get that, which is why I had to look up empathy again, because every time it's used in context, I feel like I misunderstand the definition. But empathy is not just understanding, but it's understanding and sharing the feelings
vicariously. Yeah, I mean,
it's not necessarily. Well, yeah. Yeah, so it's that sharing the feelings where it kind of gets into the goopy situation.
I love it.
Yeah,
now that's the best phrase of the show, the goopy situation.
And like where you get into the whole the relationship marketing and the touchy-feely and all that other stuff, and it's just I understand the situation you're in. Here's a solution, and is that being empathetic, or is that just being a smart marketer and understanding your audience and kind of what they're going through at the time?
I remember my middle management training. I worked for a cable company for a long time, but it was a different division. That
wasn't about empathy.
Yeah. But what the number one thing was, when you're in middle, managers are supposed to, when an employee comes in, you're supposed to listen with empathy.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't mean that you're going to say yes. It just means that the employee who comes in is going to sit down and they're going to feel as if they've had their day in court.
Can you walk us through the question? But they probably gave you scripts of when somebody comes in, you go, I too felt that way. I understand where you're coming from.
Oh, we talked about that. So condescending. Yeah.
It is. It really is. There's a commercial that's out right now.
I understand how you feel.
And it's not. And it's the exact opposite. I don't know if you've seen the new GE commercials right now, where there's this kid he's graduated from school and he's sitting on the couch telling his parents he's going to work for GE, and his parents hand him his grandpa's hammer, who also worked at GE. And he's like, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the technology side of things. And the parents don't get it at all. And they're like, you just lift the hammer, can you? And it's
even if your name is Thor. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And I love, why I love that? Because it's actually showing us lack of empathy in our everyday lives with our family and friends that occurs just as much, if not more, than what we get when we're dealing with companies. And I wonder if our need to be heard by companies is kind of like because we're not heard by the people who really should have our back, maybe.
I think as human beings, we just want to be heard, period. I mean, whether it's a company or whether it's your partner, and to be heard is not just like, yeah, I hear you, blah, blah, blah. It's being heard like you're really listening, like you're really listening to me. You're absorbing what I'm saying. You're processing. You kind of feel how I feel about it. And even though maybe you don't feel the same way, you can understand how I feel about it. And that takes you beyond just the listening and just,
Wait, Ray, were you talking? Because I was listening to my cell phone.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so we're practicing this with Carter right now too, and David's going to tune me out as well, and I'm totally cool with that.
Well,
Yeah, he doesn't, because he doesn't like this. He doesn't like this
Okay,
mushy
stop.
stuff. Hey, man, he's gotten the wrong Blab, I tell you.
And you know, well, and it's really funny because here we are, we're sitting, and maybe it's really interesting because Carter will say something like about the snow. He's like, and I get to have hot chocolate tomorrow because there's hot chocolate. It's something we're going to go to. And I'm like, yes, and there's going to be more. And he repeats hot chocolate. And I'm like, yes, and more. And then he repeats hot chocolate. And Ryan goes, yes, Carter, hot chocolate. And Carter is satisfied. And it's really strange because here I am in this situation. I'm like, I was saying yes, but he didn't get it. So is it the actual repetition of saying the words that were said to you that is how we're trained? Because maybe I lack empathy in this particular kind of situation. So if you tell me something cool, I'm going to be like, yeah, and here's what else you're going to find that's cool, instead of going, you're right.
You know what I think cool. It is why it goes. I think it goes beyond the words. That's why I said in the show, it goes beyond creating a client persona. It's projecting it. It's almost more an image than it is words. And an example would be, people get touched when they see pictures of children in distress, and because you can put yourself into the body of that 8-year-old or 5-year-old, because you know what it's like to be a 5-year-old who's lost, and therefore you're totally empathetic with that boy's situation. To me that's empathy, because you can understand how that boy feels. Yes, if you write in a paragraph, small 5-year-old boy wandering around the city, lost, can't find his mother. Yes, you can empathize in the situation because you know what the situation is. But if you actually see that boy, a photo of that boy with, on a velvet painting with teardrops, I mean, it's how you feel. That's how it makes you feel. And I don't know how that
Well, okay, but I think that's sympathy. I think you said the word. I think that's sympathy. I don't think that's empathy, because I should be able to, Ray, even though I've never walked in your shoes. I've never walked in David's shoes. And yet I should be able to hear your hurt and let you know I've heard your hurt and I understand it, even if I have never experienced it. And to me, that's what empathy is.
See, to me, there's two different things. I think sympathy is different than empathy. I don't want to get into semantics, but I think there's
right. But that's what I mean about empathy.
I
think empathy is, I don't have to have walked in your shoes. I might never have been lost, but I can look at you and you can tell me the story and I can go, wow, you've really been affected by that. Yeah. Wow, I get the feeling, and maybe even be able to articulate that feeling, even though I might have never had that exact situation.
No, you don't have to have those things. But by you saying that I get that feeling that you're having, you're empathizing with the person because you're understanding how they feel.
Well, and that comes, I mean, okay, so with what Jessica was saying, I think that comes down to when we write content, we want to answer the person's challenges and situation first before moving them on to the next phase.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I learned from my 5-year-old too. It's like, okay, I can't move on to the next thing until, yes, just like what you were saying, I've answered the question. I've said, yes, you're going to have hot chocolate. Then we're going to do something else. He's like, oh yeah, okay, hot chocolate. And then we get to do something else. Got it now.
Right.
And it's the same thing with every type of audience. You figure out their problem and you solve their problem first. And is that empathy or is that just simply good?
No, that's being a problem solver. But I think about the empathy, like for instance, there's a great ad by, I can't remember the company in England. And they did a book and they used selling the book for charity, but it's about this cat who completely destroys the house by accident. I mean, he trips on a light thing and the light thing sets off the fire and the turkey timer and the whole place almost burns, but he runs out of the house and he accidentally had dialed 99, whatever the fire thing is in England. And so the fire trucks come to the front of the house as the cat's in the front of the house. And of course they're saying he's a hero because he alerted the fire people and while he had created all the mess. Then what happens is that the parents and the kids all go in the house and everything's all burnt and their Christmas is all gone. And also, there you go. There's the Christmas nostalgia, empathy kind of thing happening. And of course, all the neighbors come in and they share their Christmas with them. And it's a big tearjerker Christmas thing. You see a lot of that at Christmas time. That's kind of empathetic in the sense that that's all about feelings. It's like the Anheuser-Busch commercials, right? With the ponies and the puppies and all. Those are all things that elicit feelings. And that, I guess, plays on empathy in a way.
Is it, or is it just emotional manipulation?
Well, we asked that in the last show. When does it cross into manipulation?
Yeah. Well, okay, so I was thinking
And
about
that's a
how
very
do
cynical
we in
take,
our daily
Jess.
lives can use this? And you brought up problem solving.
I'm surprised at you, Jess.
What are you surprised at me for? I missed it. I was talking on my own conversation.
But that's true. There's a danger of crossing into manipulation. But my God, the culture, I mean, especially the American culture is like all about that, right? I mean, look at Disney. He made an empire out of manipulation.
I tell you, so we were talking in the Ray2Go show, and you had said it here. You said it's problem solving. But what are we problem solving? Are we problem solving one squeaky wheel, or are we looking across a data set and recognizing a lot of squeaky wheels that sound similar and digging under to find that? And I think when we use the word problem solving, we got to be really careful, because if we don't, we're ending up with our little unicorn magic here. Oh, I helped that person. Oh, I helped that person. Oh,
I can't believe you pulled out the unicorn, Jess.
Well, and then we're whitewashing it with the guise of feelings over top of simple problem solving.
Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely
we're couching
problems that we have that need solving. Someone's having an issue with their website. And they're getting the bounce rates too high or whatever, and we can help them. That's a problem. It has nothing to do with emotions or empathy or whatever. But if someone's life is in a spin because they can't control the attention deficit disorder from having all these choices and all that, that goes beyond just one problem. Perhaps maybe that because it impacts on them emotionally. Not having enough bounce rate on my website doesn't impact me emotionally. It's a pain in the ass and hurts business perhaps. But my life being out of control is an emotional thing.
Well, hang on. Let's stick with this unemotional thing of bounce rate on your website. If we were to really look at this.
Hold on. Do you guys emotionally affiliate me or cross-reference me with bounce rates now? Is that what marketing angle?
We love you, David. We love you.
I mean, I know they are very emotional things, and people get very distraught by their bounce rates.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, Ray, you're saying don't put any emotion around it. And it's really not something to be emotional about. But it does show a gap between where you think your company is and then somebody like David going, well, yeah, duh, there's a gap here. And I'm going to so much nicer tell you much nicer than Jess just did that here's what's missing. Kind of thing. And so I do think that there's a big emotion. And now where I was going with this was who's involved? Who cares? Is it the guy who built the website that really is trying to hold his ground and say, my website is great and it converts the way it should? Or is it the customer service people that say, nobody can find anything on this website, and so sure, it's great, but we still have work to do? Or is it the guy who got the project done and it's like, I really want to be done with this because it's been a pain in my side for 12 months now? And understanding all the people that come together around said bounce rate is why it's so big. And I feel for you, David, because I don't want to have to know all those people. But
so Jessica, when you do post this blog post, just make sure you give me a hat tip, okay?
You got it. I think
gotta work on my branding. I'm really going to work on my brand association here. Wow. No more talking about bounce rates for a while. All right, move on.
Done.
Well, in content marketing and writing and copywriting or whatever, I mean, you have to be attuned to people's emotions because that's how you reach them, right? So, I mean, that takes empathy. You have to be a human being.
Yeah, well, I mean, and being able to create effective content and content marketing that speaks to a user in their challenge at the moment. I mean, we know that Google likes to talk about meta moments and micro moments and all that stuff, and it's how can you bond with a person quickly and effectively, and how, when they're in that situation, when they're emotionally vulnerable, like how do you help them? And that's what most web searches are now, is people helping other people, people looking for content to help them in their current situation. So how do you play to that? And it gets back to what we were talking about in the beginning, or my question was like, how much is that empathy, or how much is simply understanding the person without being sharing in their situation?
You don't want to take it on. You don't want to exactly. That makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want to wear it. I mean, you have to you have to sort of understand it and understand how that person feels by being in that situation, as you just said, David. I mean, I think that's the trick. I just can't believe that we had started this whole conversation back with the sociological implications of being too empathetic, and we ended up with bounce rates. So that's just,
okay. Maybe I need to go. I will go so you can continue back your conversation.
So I will
just heckle from the sidelines.
We all have to go.
We love your heckling, my friend.
So anyway, thanks to you guys.
Thank you for your content marketing advice also.
Yes, now I'm going off now to check out my bounce rate. So
okay, you got one of us. You got to with this guy over here.
Yeah, I know who to call if it's too high. Take care, guys. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye. Thanks, Jess.